Greetings, friends. You may remember my good friend Rick. His life has been full of paranormal and hard-to-explain occurrences, which he, in his old age, enjoys sharing with me. I sometimes note things down to relay to you, my dear listener. Here's another intriguing story from the life of Rick. When he was a child of 10 or 11 years of age, growing up in a rural town in Haiti, he lived in an area where the streets were said to be full of danger at night. At the hour of 6 p.m., the seedy underbelly of the large town reared its ugly head. Criminals, cult members, and cannibals seeped out from the cracks and made their rounds in the streets as the cover of night came about. There was a popular nightclub where beautiful women in dresses and high heels went to let off a little steam before the unspoken curfew. Rick frequently braved the streets in the dusky evening. He sat for hours outside the club, guarding bags of women's flat shoes, while their owners danced under the flashing lights inside. One night, he found himself inexplicably lost while walking home. He came upon a church that wasn't on his normal route, and could hear a faint chattering, though he could see no one around. He stopped in his tracks, afraid to pass by the ominous building, as the chattering sound grew in intensity. His heart pounded and beads of sweat began to form on his forehead, the warm vapors of perspiration wafting up from his open-collared shirt. All the while, the sun plummeted from the sky, darkening the scene. As he stood there, paralyzed with fear, a little white dog came wagging its tail and panting happily, running up to him. It darted around his feet, occasionally looking up at him and yelping. Rick felt compelled to follow the dog, and noticed that his fear and anxiety had suddenly vanished. He kept his eyes on the little white dog as it led him down an unfamiliar path, never stopping to analyze his surroundings on the way. The dog excitedly jumped around, its tail wagging profusely as he followed. Before long, Rick looked up to realize that the dog had led him directly to the front door of his house. He smiled and knelt down to pet the dog, but it was gone. Over 25 years later, Rick had moved to Brooklyn, New York, married the love of his life, whom I'll call Emmy, and had 2 children there. His son, whom I'll call Ricky, was 7 years old at the time, and had fallen violently ill with fever and severe stomach pain. Emmy held her son's limp body in her arms as they drove to the hospital to have tests ran. The medical staff there found nothing and discharged him within a couple of hours, but Rick still had the terrible feeling his son was in danger. When the couple got home, they had to park far away from their apartment. Rick carried his child in the freezing cold of the afternoon as they approached the tenement building, when Emmy noticed a small white dog coming up to them. Being afraid of dogs, she frantically tapped on Rick's shoulder to alert him. Rick looked back and saw the dog, but kept walking, reassuring his wife and saying, "Let him come." The family entered the project building with the jumpy little dog closely in tow as they walked up the 5 flights of stairs they took to avoid a filthy elevator. Emmy, still put off by the animal's presence, nudged Rick again. He responded, "Don't worry about him. Leave the dog alone. Don't say anything." They arrived at the door to their unit at the end of a long, narrow hallway, and the dog sat down, wagging its tail with its tongue hanging out. Rick unlocked the door and placed his hand on the knob to pull it open. Emmy told him not to open the door, fearing that the dog would dart inside the apartment. Rick told her not to worry. When he opened the door, Emmy turned to make sure the dog wasn't going to run in, but it had vanished. She looked down the long hallway and saw nothing. No traces of a little white dog scurrying away. When they went inside, they noticed that their little boy was sleeping soundly. His temperature and other symptoms were gone, and he wasn't sick again for years. Thanks for listening, friends. Have any of you ever seen this little white dog? Did it help you the way it helped my friend Rick? Did it follow you throughout your life? If you enjoyed this video, please share, subscribe, and check out my channel for more like this one. And if you have an interesting story of your own, Send me an email. Let's talk. You may even find your story on my channel someday for the world to see. I'm Mr. X, and may your nights be full of dreams.